of all, one of the biggest problems is that there isn't now and hasn't been since the beginning a culture of compliance with Imperial Pacific International. And unfortunately, that is also partly the responsibility of our government. We have a regulatory body, the Casino Commission. We also have the Lottery Commission, which negotiated the contract and or the license, I should say, and has also negotiated and recommended for approval now 8 different amendments since IPI was first awarded its exclusive license back in 2014. All of the license amendments have been to IPI's favor.
Why is it that you believe that the Lottery Commission, which gave them their license, decided to do so?
So the Lottery Commission consists of people who are, just by virtue of their position, they're cabinet members of the administration. So they include the Department of Public Safety Commissioner, so our police commissioner. There's also the Secretary of Finance. There's also the Secretary of Commerce. So these 3 people are all appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And as you may recall, if you have been following this issue from the very beginning, there was a strong push by the administration and by the legislature at the time to pass the law that legalized casino gambling on Saipan as quickly as possible without a committee report, without a single public hearing, and despite protests. There were petitions against this bill. There were protests. People were showing up at the legislature to express their concerns about this, because Saipan voters have actually voted against casino gambling twice now in our history. And so that was happening in 2013, 2014. And just prior to the very expedited legalization of casino gambling on Saipan, a company that we now know is linked to IPI was funding these all expense paid trips to Hong Kong and Macau for these casino fact-finding missions that key lawmakers who ended up voting yes to the Saipan casino law, including now the current governor, Ralph Torres, they went on these trips, and within months of returning from these trips, passed the Saipan casino law. So that's some of the history. There were all kinds of questions and speculation about what may have transpired on those trips. What we know is that a company linked to IPI paid for those trips. IPI subsequently received the exclusive license. Some have also said, for good reason, I think, that the terms of the license, that the law was written specifically with one developer in mind, and that developer got a very good deal. And since then, since receiving this license, the administration, the regulatory bodies have had such a difficult time holding IPI to its promises. But also, I think it's fair to say that they really haven't tried that hard. And only now when IPI has breached practically everything and now has failed to pay the license fee and has failed to pay taxes, they're in arrears to everybody. They're being sued by vendors and former workers, and I mean, you name it. There are lawsuits everywhere, and it seems like there's a new one every day. Only now is the administration making threats to revoke the license, but that also remains to be seen.
Well, as you mentioned, CNMI is a U.S. territory under U.S. federal jurisdiction. How has this been allowed to happen? You would think that at least at some level, law enforcement authorities or regulators would come down on what looks like a very suspicious set of transactions.
Sure, and it is my understanding that there are federal investigations underway. Back in November 2019, federal agents raided both IPI and the governor's office, as well as the governor's home and vehicles, and the home and offices of IPI associates and members of the governor's family. And the allegations that were under investigation, which we know from a search warrant that was ultimately circulated widely here, those allegations included money laundering and illegal campaign contributions, wire fraud, honest services fraud, conspiracy. So, something happened in November. There hasn't been any indictment yet. We did hear about the grand jury meeting. And, like COVID also happened in March, and that shut things down and slowed everybody down in a lot of ways. But my impression is that there is still an investigation happening, but how soon we would know, what the outcome will be. Nobody can ever really tell that, and the federal government kind of moves at its own pace, right? I think also it's worth noting that IPI has disclosed that FinCEN has identified a number of violations of the Bank Secrecy Act, and that they are still preparing their response to FinCEN since receiving the letter identifying, apparently it was like 90 some pages of violations that were found. And so back in March 2020 is when they received the letter, and they're still, as of a couple weeks ago when I asked about it, IPI is still preparing their response.
Presuming that the company is able to pay its license fee, presuming that it's able to open its facilities and start generating revenue and employment again. Do you think that IPI should be allowed to carry on under a better regulatory regime, or do you think that they've already done so many, so much hanky-panky that the plug needs to be pulled and it needs to go away?
So those are all huge presumptions that you put out there, presuming that IPI can pay its license fee when they're already asking the government for a break on the license fee. They're asking if they could pay it in maybe 15 years from now. They're asking if maybe they could pay it in installments. So like that off the bat they're already in breach, a major breach that is a revocable cause. Right. And like presuming that they pay their taxes, there is a tax lien that finally, after a number of years, Rev and Tax filed with the court, they owe at least $9 million. There's the developer's tax. That's at least $18 million if their claims about investing $1 billion in the CNMI thus far are really true. And we look at their audited financial statements, they are in so much debt. And, if the auditors have been saying for the last couple of years that they have serious doubts about IPI's ability to continue as a going concern, if their financial suitability is definitely under question, right? And then there's the specter of FinCEN. We already have, right, in this Commonwealth, a casino that was shut down by FinCEN not that long ago. The biggest FinCEN fine in the entire history of FinCEN was levied on this casino here in the CNMI, on Tinian, on the island of Tinian. And for breaches that, may have paled in comparison to what I'm hearing IPI may have committed. There is a process that is spelled out in our law for when the casino license should be revoked. And IPI is entitled to due process. So far, they've been warned that they're at risk of losing their license, but the actual hearing process has really not happened yet. So, to answer your question, I think we need to begin that process, that revocation process. And it should be a public process. It should be transparent. And then we could make a decision about where we go from here. But I have my doubts about whether we are really dealing with this company, if they're able to negotiate with us in good faith, right? And, that sure, there's potential for IPI to be a big contributor to the economy and a big employer, but they're not paying all their workers right now. They've fallen behind on payroll. They're not paying taxes. What other business here gets away with that? It's just such a mess, right? And the thing is, it's a mess that we probably should have foreseen years ago when, like, even before casino gaming was legalized. And in fact, actually, it is that, like, people did foresee that. Like, people were worried about exactly this kind of thing happening, that there were doubts about our ability to regulate an industry like this. There were doubts about the honesty of our politicians to be able to negotiate something with somebody who could fairly even win a bid, right? There were concerns about organized crime and money laundering. I just remember that being part of the conversation, the public conversation, before we went to vote and when we voted no. And so, here we are 5 years later, and we have a big mess on our hands. But the other problem that we have is this unfinished monstrosity in the middle of our tourist district. And like IPI, while they're asking us for breaks on their license, breaks on everything, all their obligations, they have not been able to finish this building, and yet they want more public land. They want more from this government and from the people of this Commonwealth. And at this point, I just see no reason why we should give more than we already have.